Become the best in the world at what you do. Keep redefining what you do until this is true. This man right here, Naval Ravikant, is full of these succinct lines that perfectly encapsulates things that I know to be true, but just can't articulate as brilliantly as he can. That's probably because I'm not that smart. So today we are in luck because with the help of this book, Naval's Almanac, I'm going to share with you what I consider to be some of the best advice I have ever received. If you don't know who Naval is, you can go and check him out on your own, but the best way that I would describe him is somebody who is hyper successful, hyper wise. He's a polymath and a philosopher, I guess you could say, and he's probably most famously known for his ability to take things that we all know are true within our own hearts, but we can't explain, and he's able to take these truths and just brilliantly articulate them in as little words as possible. So we'll be going through that, but also to celebrate getting this thing here. I originally wanted to do like a Q&A section at the end of this video so that I could answer some of the questions you guys might have for me, but then I thought that I don't know if that's the best thing to do because then I only get to answer like a handful of your questions. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to write you guys a response to all of your questions. So if you submitted one over the last little while, you should see a response from me. Hopefully they are not, it was free, so there's no refunds, I'm afraid. So I want to go through some of my favorite pieces from, I guess, Naval's brain here in this book with you. And the way I want to do it is by kind of categorizing everything. So I want to start off with a section on wealth and career. I also want to talk about wisdom. I want to talk about happiness. And I also want to talk about art. So we'll start with that first category, wealth and career. So the first passage that really spoke to me here was this one in particular. He says, "It's not really about hard work. You can work in a restaurant 80 hours a week and you're not going to get rich. Getting rich is about knowing what to do, who to do it with, and when to do it. It is much more about understanding than purely hard work. Yes, hard work matters and you can't skimp on it, but it has to be directed in the right way." And then he goes on to say, "If you don't know yet what you should work on, the most important thing is to figure it out. You should not grind at a lot of hard work until you figure out what you should be working on." I think this really resonated with me because for a period of time, I knew I was, really capable of working hard. I just didn't know what it was that I wanted to work hard at. So the first step I took was to actually work hard at becoming more financially independent by living drastically below my means, because I knew that in the meantime, while I was building up this financial independence, when the time did come that I did know what it was that I wanted to work hard on, I would be in a really strong position to be able to do so. The next passage that really spoke to me is how Naval defines the difference between wealth and money, which I think is a very important distinction. So he says, "Money is how we transfer wealth. Money is social credits. It's the ability to have credits and debits of other people's time. But wealth is the thing you want. Wealth is assets that earn while you sleep. Wealth is the factory, the robots cranking out things. Wealth is the computer program that's running at night serving other customers. Wealth is even the money in the bank that is being reinvested into other assets and into other businesses." So I personally think that we are perhaps living in the best period of time for everyone to have a chance at building their wealth. And that's because today we don't have to have employees, we don't have to have factories or robots working for us, because A, we can legally own our own property, which is a form of wealth that can grow over time, and B, we can own parts of other businesses through the stock market. And with these two things, it's never been more easy for an ordinary person to actually build wealth in their life that used to be reserved for the elite members of society. The next part on wealth I found really interesting is actually, I believe this was a tweet that Naval put out, and he says, "The best jobs are neither decreed nor degreed. They are creative expressions of continuous learners in free markets." I thought this was really interesting, and it really resonates with me because I'm the type of person who I never felt like I slotted into any particular lane in life, whether that was like science, math, business. I was interested in all of it. I like to just keep learning new things about literally any subject. So that kind of really spoke to me, and it was cool to see how much emphasis Naval places upon being a lifelong learner. And I think that's a trait which might be especially rare in today's world because you have so many of these different, what I would call churches, that kind of control the access or the distribution of information in so many different domains. So what I mean by that is, if we're talking about in the financial world, you have the church of index investing, you have the church of dividend investing, you have the church of Bitcoin. And people go into these churches and they get stuck. And then they're unable to change their mind from that point forwards or learn new information because these churches have their approved Bibles, they have their dogma, they have, all these different things. And if someone tries to contradict the church, generally they get criticized and cast out from it. So the way that I like to think about all these different things is kind of treating them like a wine tour. I like to go in, I like to sample things, take what I like with me, and then move on. Another thing that really spoke to me is Naval's definition of retirement. He says, retirement is when you stop sacrificing today for an imaginary tomorrow. When today is complete in and of itself, you're retired. And the reason this really resonated with me is because if you've been watching my videos for a little while, then you know that I've had quite a journey with the whole financial independence, retire early thing, and I've been kind of continuously exploring and redefining what retirement means for me. And I think Naval said it perfectly here. And the last passage to round out this section on wealth and career, I thought was this really interesting part between this idea that a lot of people follow a particular path in life where they're seeking to become wealthy and then afterwards become happy because of the practicality of things. And so Naval says, most of the time, the person you have to become to make money is a high anxiety, high stress, hardworking, competitive person. When you have done that for 20, 30, 40, 50 years and you suddenly make money, you can't turn it off. You've trained yourself to be a high anxiety person. Then you have to learn how to be happy. So, doing kind of the career shift that I've been on and making videos online and stuff like that, I've definitely noticed that I've become all of those things more so than I was before. I'm definitely more high anxiety, high stress, hardworking, competitive person. Like he says, you kind of have to be in most cases if you are trying to go out in the world and basically make it for yourself. But then at that point, when you consider, okay, I'm done, I've gotten what I needed, then yeah, you probably can't just turn that off, right? Then you almost have to learn, okay, how do I become happy now? Because I'm this ball of stress type of person that I've trained myself to be over this period of time. So I think that's a great segue into talking about happiness. But before we go any further, I have to take a quick moment to thank today's sponsor for helping to make this video possible, and that is Motion Array. Motion Array is the only platform that I've used for visual assets since starting my channel back in, I think, the end of 2019. And the reason I've used Motion Array for that long, and only Motion Array, is because to me, it's basically like using a huge cheat code to instantly up the quality of your videos. And that's because they have a template, a preset, or a motion graphic file for almost anything you can possibly think of. Personally, I make a lot of use out of their animated titles as well as their motion graphic files because I don't know how to create anything that good on my own, and so it just saves me a ton of time, a ton of money, and like I said, it looks great. You don't need to be an editing genius either or anything like that. I mean, everything's really simple to use. You basically just plug and play, just drop it on the timeline and you're good to go. So if you also want to up the quality of your work, you can find a link in the description down below where you can save $50 off an annual plan. Thank you so much to Motion Array for powering my videos for the past couple years and for helping make this video possible. So Naval's definition of happiness seems to center around peace, neutrality, and acceptance. And he also believes that happiness is a choice you make and it's a skill that you develop. So the first passage I would start with here is he says, nature has no concept of happiness or unhappiness. Nature follows unbroken mathematical laws and a chain of cause and effect from the Big Bang until now. Everything is perfect, exactly the way it is. It is only in our particular minds we are unhappy or not happy, and things are perfect or imperfect because of what we desire. And this segues into this really, really great visualization that was done by Jack Butcher, who's done all of them for this particular book. And you can see here, it's like a contract. So desire is a contract that you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. I think this is so true because I know that, well, right now I have something coming up in the future that I'm really excited for. That's very, very soon. And I know that I'm placing so much of like my happiness on that thing, basically working out. If something goes wrong with that, I know it's going to stress me out or cause me to, you know, feel unpleasant about it. So it kind of becomes like the axis of my happiness and suffering. And Naval says another really interesting thing here, because he's not saying that we shouldn't have any desires. He's not hardcore about that. He's just more, I think, trying to help us be aware of this fact that desire is this contract that we make with ourselves in regards to our happiness. So he personally says, I try not to have more than one big desire in my life at any given time, and I also recognize it as the axis of my suffering. I realize the area where I've chosen to be unhappy. So definitely something to think about, and I guess look inside yourself and see if maybe that's the same way you might react to a lot of the big desires in your own life. And then finally, to round out this section on happiness, the person who compiled this book, Eric Jorgensen, asks Naval this really great question that I would also pose to you. So he says, Buffett has a great example when he asks, if you want to be the world's best lover and known as the worst, or the world's worst lover and known as the best. And this speaks to the idea of an internal or external scorecard and what's actually more important. Next, I would like to talk about a section on wisdom. So Naval has a lot of interesting thoughts about how to make better decisions, how to think more clearly, how to be an independent thinker. And the one I would like to start with here, he says, you have to put in the time, but the judgment is more important. The direction you're heading in matters more than how fast you move. This really speaks to me because I'm personally I think I would push back a little bit on, especially as it pertains to things like YouTube. People say, oh, just make your first video, just jump in. Gear doesn't matter. All this stuff about basically just start working, whatever. I would push back a little bit and say that I think gear does matter, and I think it is important to figure out the direction you want to head in before you just jump in. Or at least that's me. I like to think things through for a while before I actually start, so that I know that when I do commit my efforts, I know where they're going, as opposed to kind of just, aiming all over the place, walking here, walking there. You might not really end up anywhere if you're not heading in the exact direction you want to go in. Another really interesting visualization done by Jack here is the idea that one of the rarest types of people in the world is an optimistic contrarian. And what Naval means by this is he says, a contrarian isn't one who always objects, That's a conformist of a different sort. A contrarian reasons independently from the ground up and then resists pressure to conform. So to me, what he's really saying here is he's speaking about being an independent thinker, but also an optimistic independent thinker. So not somebody who's just always looking for flaws in everything and trying to shoot things down about why it won't work. No, it's about thinking things through from the ground up on your own, but also trying to see the positive side, or trying to see how the world can be a better place in the future for everyone, and believing in that. And the last part I wanted to include about wisdom and the idea of thinking more clearly and making better decisions is this section here where Eric asks Naval, do you agree with the idea if you read what everyone else is reading, you're going to think what everyone else is thinking? And Naval responds, I think almost everything that people read these days is designed for social approval. I know people who have read 100 regurgitated books on evolution and they've never read Darwin. So I think this is really speaking to the idea of source works and derivative works. I think you can make the argument that basically every piece of work is a derivative work of something that came before it. You know, nothing new, there's nothing new under the sun. But I also think there are these important works that come along and they kind of really change the way of thinking within a particular domain. So Darwin would be a great example for evolution, as he was kind of the originator of a ton of the ideas in that particular domain, and same with Adam Smith for economics. So I think in order to be an independent thinker, yes, it's good to read the derivative works of these kind of source materials, but I think it's also really important that we ourselves read those source materials so that we can come up with our own interpretations, and then maybe go ahead and place those against other people's interpretations. And now I'd like to move on to a section talking about art and what it means to be an artist in the modern world, and how to succeed as an artist if you'd like to do that as your career. So I'd like to return to that original illustration that I started with, where he says, become the best in the world at what you do, and keep redefining what you do until this is true. So you can see there's a bunch of different common shapes here that get increasingly more, I guess you could say, distinct as you go along, until you get to a point where it doesn't really look like a shape you'd be familiar with. It looks like a completely unique shape. And that's the idea, that we start out trying to figure out exactly who we are, what we have to offer the world, and what we can, be the best at. But there's so many triangles out there, you know, there's so many diamonds out there. We have to figure out our own unique shape and how that fits in the world. And once we do that, we are the best at what we do because we're the only person who actually does it. And to support this idea, he has another, I think it was a tweet here, where he says, no one can compete with you on being you. Most of life is a search for who and what needs you the most. And in addition to that, there's another great one-liner here: escape competition through authenticity. And he expands on this by saying, basically, when you're competing with other people, it's because you're copying them. It's because you're trying to do the same thing. But every human is different. Don't copy. And the last piece from Naval here, before I give my own little 2 cents under this art category, Naval provides a really nice definition for art. He says, art is creativity. Art is anything done for its own sake. I think that's a really, really nice way to put it. But if someone is looking to be an artist as a career path, then it means that by definition, they can't just be doing it for its own sake, right? Because they're looking to earn a livelihood from it, which means that they're going to need to play some type of competitive game with other people. And if that's the case, then that means that there's going to be constraints placed upon that artwork. Now, I think we live in probably the best period of time for creating art, because most of the constraints that used to exist don't exist anymore. Being able to distribute your artwork through social media is an unprecedented and incredibly powerful thing. But there still are definitely constraints. There still is definitely a competitive game to be played. And a lot of people, myself included some of the time, don't like the game and they want to change the game. But I think in order to be able to change the game, you first have to be good at the game. You have to earn that power and that right to be able to actually change it. A number of the artists that I look up to, for example, Beyonce, Kendrick, Chappelle, they're all people who started by playing the game, but then they got so good at the game that they were able to rewrite the rules to suit them. And now they're just playing their own game. They're not even playing with anybody else. They've escaped that competition through authenticity, but they had to kind of earn the right to do that first. And with that said, I think that is a pretty nice spot to end. So I will say goodbye for now. Thank you so much for watching this video. I might not see you again for a little while because I'm going on an adventure. So until we meet again, my friend.